things I never knew. When you make mistakes you can't undo. If there's a problem, you'll get through. So let our love lead you down the roads I once knew. I'll let your love teach me all the things I never knew. When you cry, I'll comfort you as you seek what is true. If there's a problem, you'll get through. Remember, I know you. I know you. I know you. Thank you.
Serving our community for more than 100 years, Hochstein celebrates all who enter here as supporters of the arts. We ask that you take notice of the emergency exits located at all corners of the hall on both levels. Restrooms are to the back of the hall downstairs. Additional accessible bathrooms are located on the main level in the school building. Please take a moment to silence your electronic devices. For the courtesy of everyone in attendance and on stage, we ask that you remain seated and only enter and exit during applause or a break in the program. Thank you and enjoy the performance.
Welcome to the Hochstein Performance Hall and ROC The Mic's 2022 production of Listen to Your Mother Rochester. Our MC tonight is Andrea Holland. Storyteller, coach, and mojo booster, that's Andrea Holland. For over 20 years, Andrea has worked to tell the stories of some pretty amazing people through her roles in marketing and broadcast media. Now, as a coach, she helps others learn to confidently tell their own stories. Andrea is a proud mom of her almost 3-year-old daughter, Luciana, and regularly finds half-eaten kid snacks all over her house. Follow Andrea on her motherhood and storytelling journey at andreaholland.net. Please help me welcome to the stage, Andrea Holland.
That's a long walk in real pants. Don't act like you all have been wearing regular pants this whole COVID time. You haven't. I know you all put on real pants to come here tonight, so congratulations to you. Real pants, real pants. All right, so hello everybody. Yes, you guys ready for a fantastic evening of stories? Yes, so officially I'd like to welcome you all to ROC The Mic's Listen to Your Mother Rochester 2022. But I'm not the show. The show are the fantastic storytellers who have prepared an amazing journey for you tonight with all of their stories. So let's welcome the folks that you came here to see. For the ones we're here to see, please help me welcome the 12 storytellers of this year's amazing cast. Welcome again to all of you live here in the theater and those of you watching at home. We've all worked so hard to put this show together, and it culminates tonight for our favorite part, letting the audience in to hear the stories. You and your energy here really are the 13th cast member of this experience, and we could not be more excited that the show night is finally here. Am I right? Am I right, you guys excited? Yes. So throughout the auditions, the read-throughs, the rehearsals, the entire journey, one thread that emerges among every writer and throughout every cast is the need to belong. To build and nurture meaningful relationships, worthy goals, and strong connections. It's important to everyone navigating a human experience. And we all seek that sense of belonging in different ways. So we're glad you're here tonight to be a part of that belonging. It's my pleasure to introduce the team that made Listen to Your Mother Rochester 2022 come to life. So please help me welcome Monica Gabel, executive producer. Woohoo! Aaron Waller, executive director. And producers Christine Green, Terry Pease, Taylor Terrance, and Walt Way.
Thank you, Andrea. It is thrilling for all of us here to have you as our MC this evening. I'm Erin Waller, and I was in the 2018 cast. I served as a producer in 2019, and have served as the executive director of Listen to Your Mother Rochester for the past 2, technically 3 years. The title's pretty cool, but it really means nothing without this team of producers that you see before you. This team is incredible. I'm so grateful for all of them and the way they care so deeply about this show. First, I need to acknowledge Monica Gabel. Monica is the owner of ROC The Mic Productions and the executive producer of tonight's show. It's an honor to work with you, and we are so thankful for all you have done to keep Listen to Your Mother in Rochester. I also need to acknowledge Terry Pease and Jane Knickerbocker. Terry's part of our production team, but is having her very own magical mom moment. She's watching her daughter graduate from college right now. She embodies all things Listen to Your Mother. And this show is not possible without all that she does. I also need to acknowledge Jane Knickerbocker. She served as a producer for the last year and is the best bad mom there is. We miss her on the team, but she is our biggest cheerleader, and she did so much to make us better. We also owe a debt of gratitude to the producers and the cast members that came before us. Your success made this possible. And the cast tonight, they are bringing their whole selves to the mic tonight, proving they belong here. They are worthy of having their story heard. And then I have some personal thank yous, so just indulge me for a moment. The first is for my mom, Camille Julian. She made this, you guys. I also need to thank my husband, Mike. Thank you for loving me and supporting me. Christine?
I'm Christine Green, a producer for the last 2 years, and I was in the 2017 cast. We want to thank you, the audience. Whether you're watching at home or here live in the theater, your energy is part of the collective well of support that keeps us growing. We're growing love and good energy, and that's the reason Listen to Your Mother Rochester continues to have such a positive, upward trajectory within our family, our friends, and our community. We would like to take this moment to thank our sponsors. We have many of them. We are so grateful. First, our Ultra Megaphone sponsors tonight are Selena's Mexican Restaurant. Woo, yeah! They not only fed us twice as we worked to build this show, they also gave us space for our read-through in their amazing party room. They have delicious food and an amazing staff. We love Selena's. Thank you, Selena's. Rock Vox Recording. Scott is bringing this show to you right now and provides our show recordings. Amazing. It's amazing. NSP Studio. Wow, how can we thank these guys? The team at NSP Studio takes our photos and makes us look amazing. Thank you. It's up there now, Anna. A special thank you to Anna, who is taking my picture right now. Andrea Holland Communication. We know who that is. Our incredible MC tonight is also an executive coach and communications goddess. Walt will take the rest. All right.
Thank you. For those who don't know, I am Walt Way, AKA the former Love Poet. I was a part of the 2021 cast, and I served as a producer this year. Thank you. Our megaphone sponsors are On Hand Lotions, Writers and Books, Ampersand Books, and Polite Ink Comedy. Our microphone sponsors are 585 Magazine and Rochester Spoken Word. Yes. Yeah. Our podium sponsors are our ASL interpreters, Caleb Brown and Rebecca Folkarts. Sherman, give it up for them. Give it up for them. Yeah. Sherman Furniture Rentals, Deanna Spiata, Scott Miller Salon and Spa, and Imprintable Solutions, Inc. All right, yeah. Our shout-out sponsors are Lozier Environmental Consulting, Inc. and Wegmans. Yeah. A special thank you to Corey Carter, Megan Spurbert, Stacy K. Floral, the staff at Hochstein, and the team at the Society for Protection and Care of Children, the SPCC, and all our volunteers tonight. Now, Taylor.
I am Taylor Terrence, and I was in the 2019 cast, and I have been a producer for the last 2 shows. Our production team would also like to thank our families. They've all given us time and space to work on the show. It takes a lot of energy, effort, and collaboration to make Listen to Your Mother Rochester a reality, and our families all let us do our thing to make it a success. And sometimes, like within my own family, they're the subject of our stories and also the butt of our jokes, and they always take it like a champ. Turning our attention now toward another important champ is the SPCC. Every year, our mission is to link creative expression with charitable giving to local nonprofits that serve women and children. Once again, all proceeds from tonight's event benefit a crucial organization, the Society for the Protection and Care of Children, SPCC. Over 8 seasons of Listen to Your Mother Rochester, we have raised over $40,000 for the SPCC. Our city in particular struggles with some of the worst child poverty in the nation, so events like tonight give us hope. By purchasing a ticket for tonight's show, you have helped some of our most vulnerable citizens. To share how the Society for the Protection and Care of Children is a positive force in our community is Sarah Fitzgibbons. Sarah serves as a vice president at SPCC, and she was also on the original production team that brought Listen to Your Mother to Rochester. Please welcome Sarah Fitzgibbons.
Thanks all. Thanks cast and crew and production team. Since 2015, Listen to Your Mother Rochester has ensured that the 7,000 children and families SPCC serves each year, impacted by trauma, adversity, loss, hunger, systemic racism, and poverty, can get what they need. Your support has had tremendous, immediate, and long-lasting impact. The stories told from this stage each year stay with our agency, and they connect with the work we do each day. In the very first show, our late friend, Bernadette Lynch, shared her story of finding light in the darkness. As years went on, now Dr. Takia Graham reminded us that love can be a life preserver and that nourishment flows 2 ways. Erica Bryant pointed out that while we want our stories to end with a profound and beautiful moral, sometimes a story is simply a cautionary tale reminding us to always, always fasten both tabs of your toddler's diaper. And last year, Walt Way shared 14 and a half things he's learned from his mother, including that it's okay to not be okay. These and all Listen to Your Mother stories are woven into the fabric of SPCC. You have offered us light, community, and connection, the opportunity for a time and a space to listen to each other, to feel heard, to feel less alone, to revel in what unites us, to cherish how our paths are different, to celebrate that vulnerability is really the only way to grow, heal, and find each other. SPCC thanks each and every one of you for your connection and support.
All right, thank you, Sarah. SPCC, in fact, does amazing work. The work of moms. So if you're able, please consider donating directly to SPCC so our impact here can be even greater. You can visit their website, spcc-roch.org. So while you're checking your phone for your text messages, just do a little donate. No hurt nobody. Just saying, and we'll remind you. Okay, so we have a lot of amazing folks in the room tonight. We have some moms in the room. Yeah, let me hear it for the moms. The grandmas, the aunties, the titis. I have a titi, my sister in the audience. My amazing Puerto Rican mother is here. And dad, hi. Because we got a lot of men in here who act like moms, got to be like a mom. We got people that aren't moms, but are something like a mom to somebody in their life. Yes, so bravo to everybody here. You, in fact, make this a celebration. So I'm going to let you guys in on a little secret. See, I heard some of these amazing stories in the rehearsal the other day, and I got hip to the scene real quick and realized Mama couldn't wear mascara. Because I knew I was gonna cry. So here's my secret. Instead of mascara, I put on fake eyelashes. So here's your job tonight. If you see one of those bad boys trickle down like a little spider, I just need you to go along and go, oh. And recognize that I'm trying not to cry because these stories are amazing. So let's get to it. Let's get to the show. So our first story comes to us from Karen Dickerson. Just like everything else in life, many parts of motherhood often don't go as planned. Karen got a crash course in the unexpected, starting right from her first birthing experience. Here with her story, The Business of Being Born, please welcome Karen Dickerson.
Ever since my mom died, hospitals have made me anxious. But this story isn't about my mom. It's not even really about hospitals. This is about my issues with idealism and goddamn talk show host Ricky Lake. Before I gave birth, not a single one of my friends who'd had kids had told me their birth story. My mom had 3 children. My sister had 5. But no one talked about it. My first pregnancy was 2 years after Ricky Lake's documentary about hospital birth, The Business of Being Born. In case you haven't seen it, it's a film about the cycle of Pitocin, epidurals, and C-sections, and how hospitals push women through childbirth like a conveyor belt instead of letting them birth the way nature intended. Ricky Lake told me that every woman has the goddess-given ability to have a beautiful, natural birth in a stone hot tub, on a grassy knoll, or even just grabbing a tree branch and squatting down in the woods. My body was made for childbirth. So my husband and I planned for a home birth because we believed it would be natural and safe and beautiful. We spent months preparing, and then my due date finally came, and then it went. Until one night, I felt a strange pluck like a guitar string, and my water broke all over the floor. We called the midwife and scurried around getting ready, and then we just waited, and waited, and waited. After 24 hours with no contractions, my midwife advised a long walk. So, because we lived in Brooklyn at the time, we decided to take the mile walk to the grocery store and grab some food. I was in the middle of the food town when the contractions began. This lady passed by as I was squatting next to my grocery cart while my husband shopped for frozen pizza. She was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just in early labor. It's fine." The mile walk back home was not so fine. At home, I settled in for the hard part, the moving around, pretending to breathe my way through the most agonizing, stabbing pain I have ever experienced, ever. We didn't know at the time that my son was face up, which causes intense back pain and longer labor. While I cried and moaned, my husband and doula brought me water and food that I was too nauseated to eat, and my midwife sat in the corner in the rocking chair, knitting. After every rise and fall of pain, I would look to her for a cue that we were getting somewhere, that we were just like accomplishing something, and she just calmly kept knitting. I wanted to stab her in the eye with those knitting needles. 16 hours and a lovely scarf later, it was finally time to start pushing. Pushing was supposed to be when I felt some relief, some control. It meant I was near the end. But after all those hours of not eating, I had no energy left for pushing. And I realized in that moment something that I've said to myself 1,000 times since becoming a mom. No one else is going to do this. I have to do this. For 2 hours, I pushed against a brick wall of pain. Sometimes I almost passed out until, with no warning or any change in sensation, the midwife suddenly held up this giant 9-pound baby. And I just stared at him and I thought, who is that? And where did it come from? She immediately laid him on me for some semi-conscious bonding time while she began poking and prodding and stitching. I begged her to please just leave it all alone. Just stop touching. It turns out, pushing my son's head out in a posterior position had dragged my entire cervix along with it, and she was trying to shove everything back into place. Yeah. The beautiful part about home birth is that you get to lay in your own bed with your newborn and your partner. The doula and midwife clean everything up and they make you snacks, but then they leave. So it was just my husband, a newborn baby, and nearly unconscious me, all alone in the middle of the night. When I was struggling to nurse, we were alone. When I was in so much physical pain after 44 hours of labor and just couldn't get out of bed to even go to the bathroom, we were alone. Just two exhausted, brand new parents. My body felt like shredded meat. But I'd done it, all natural. No hospital, no drugs. I was a goddess. But then 2 weeks went by, and I still couldn't nurse. And my son didn't gain any weight, and the pediatrician told me he was failing to thrive. And I had to supplement. After everything we had done to bring my son into the world naturally, my first trip to the store was to buy formula. And I stood in line with my screaming, starving baby, and I was crushed. Ricky Lake had convinced me that I was naturally an expert and had everything I needed to give birth to my son in a natural and safe way. And when it didn't apply to me, I felt like a failure. I now know that if I'd had a C-section then, and with my second, I wouldn't have had to have a hysterectomy 4 years ago. Idealism is fine until you can't let go. I don't tell this story to say that home birth is good or bad. I tell this story because I wish someone had convinced me there's no one right way to give birth. And I wish I had never watched that damn documentary. That's why I tell my story. And maybe next time, I'll tell you about my second home birth, which was even worse.
Man, damn you, Ricky Lake. Ooh. Too much knowledge, too much knowledge. Thank you, bravo, Karen. Nothing like starting the show off with a little bit of a bang. Sometimes life leaves you cursing a talk show host, and sometimes it leaves you adoring sacred things, like statues. For a look at that, please welcome our next reader with her story, My Mother Saved Mary. Please welcome Jean Arnold.
When my mother was around 12 years old, she was readying to leave class one day at her Catholic grammar school for girls, putting on her secondhand purple winter wool coat with big Paddington-like buttons. She swung the coat's arm around and knocked a statue of a veiled Mary, the Blessed Virgin, onto the ground. Mary shattered, and the nuns shuddered. The nuns told my mother they were not upset, but my mother was mortified that the nuns also asked the girls to contribute any funds they could spare to purchase a new statue. The girls gave, and together with the nuns, scrounged together enough for a new Mary. The new Mary was modern, unveiled, loose hair, in a flowy dress, holding baby Jesus. This is not a religious story. I tell this story because it was one I was lucky enough to hear from my mother, who is now 83 years old. Listen to your mother. My mother's name is Barbara. Her mother also was named Barbara, but didn't like the name, so she went by Mary. Growing up, we didn't hear too many stories from my mother. She was busy. My mother named her first girl, my older sister, Mary. Mary was born a year after Michael, and he was born a year after James. My mother almost had a nervous breakdown after birthing 3 children in a row. She didn't get pregnant again for 4 years when she birthed Peter, and 3 years later, me. When I was in kindergarten, my mother revealed that she was pregnant to us days before she miscarried, walking me home from the school bus stop. She was hunched over, holding on to our station wagon that she had just learned to drive at the end of the driveway. I remember her later calling it a blessing. I have few memories of my mother sitting still. She was always cleaning, cooking, cleaning some more. Cleanliness is next to godliness. The sound of the vacuum as familiar as church hymns. When she did sit, she'd always be in her chair at the head of the kitchen table. Both in the morning and at night as ritual, she would sit with her hands around a cup of coffee or wine, depending on the time of day. In the morning, she would sit silently and listen to NPR. At night, she would sit silently and read a book, always novels, because she used them to escape real life. My mother believed in privacy. She'd stare straight ahead, lost in whatever she was thinking, almost as if she'd left her body vacant. I remember as a child trying to pry into the vacancy. It felt so comfortable just sitting with her and enjoying the quietness around her, the way so many children seem to love to do with their mothers, without understanding how we disturb that quietness with our very presence. The quiet spoke. Listen to your mother. When I was 16, I spent a year abroad as an exchange student. I learned the most from my mother that year because she would type me a weekly letter, date on top. She wrote that my brother got engaged, that she went to JCPenney and there was a good sale, that her dog Candy continued to pee on the carpet. Once, I remember she wrote that if she knew how much she'd miss me, she might not have let me go. She signed Mom under her typed love at the end of each letter. Her first M, separate from the O and second M, linked together in an OM.
My mother had a corner ledge at the back of her closet behind her hanging clothes that my brother and I had discovered she used to hide our Christmas gifts. Once, I found a composition notebook there, black and white marble, the name Barbara written under the words, "This book belongs to." I always kept a journal, and when I thought that maybe my mother too was writing down her inner thoughts, I opened it. But inside were only prayers, scrawled in my mother's half-script, half-print writing, small, filling only the space between the blue lines. I wanted to find my mother, but instead, all I found was a mother praying to Jesus' mother, asking for help. After I had my own children in my 30s, I often wondered whether all mothers are always just looking for help. My mother is on her own now. She has osteoporosis, spinal stenosis, and degenerative disc disease. She used to be my height, but now I stand half a foot taller. She looks like she is always praying. She is in pain. Yet, despite this pain, she irons her clothes to perfection. On Saturdays, she presses her khaki pants along with a white blouse that she wears under a sweater vest for Sunday Mass. We go to Mass together. One Sunday, the priest tells us that if we just say 2 Hail Mary prayers a day, miracles will happen. I do. I pray that Mary will remember how my mother saved her and that Mary will now have my mother's back. Listen to my mother.
Such a sweet story. Thank you, Jean. And I'm pretty sure that every mom prays for help at some point or another. Year after year, we're reminded that courage is such a necessary component of motherhood, even if it means having the courage not to follow everyone's advice. Our next speaker has her own tale of that kind of courage. With her story, I Didn't Listen to My Mother. Please welcome Allison Zukowski.
As far back as I can remember, I was told how difficult of a child I was, that I used to climb everything, run away, and that I was too much to handle. So my grandmother wouldn't watch me. In my teenage years, I was constantly reminded how my mother couldn't wait until I had a child of my own so I could be paid back for all I had put her through. I also heard it while pregnant and after having my kiddo. I was labeled as bad at a young age in school system. I loved to chat, was easily distracted, and according to my kindergarten teacher, I would never be successful. If only she could see me now. I now think back to these messages being conveyed to me at such a young age and how it impacted me deeper than I was ever able to acknowledge. The stories were told over and over again where I was reminded of how difficult I was, how I was a challenge, and that I was bad for how I acted. Don't get me wrong, I did some things that were not so great, but they were normal kid things. Everyone sneaks out the house to meet their bestie when they're 13, right? In my 20s, I began to realize that the relationship that I had with my mother was not normal. As a kid, I thought everyone else had an imbalanced relationship. I couldn't understand why they called their moms so much for advice or support, or why they wanted to hang out with them so often. The realization that I grew up with the realization that what I grew up with was not a typical relationship was crushing to my heart, and I grieved the loss of what I needed. I've always feared becoming like my mother. I actually decided at one point that I didn't want to have kids because I didn't want to raise them the way as I was raised. After a lot of therapy, and I mean a lot, I was able to start to develop a new narrative. I began to not listen to my mother's version of who I was and step into the woman I am today. When I got pregnant with my daughter, I dove headfirst into books about gentle parenting. I never wanted to have my daughter have the relationship that I have with my mom or that my mom has with hers. The more I realized that my mother raised me how she was raised, and my grandmother raised my mom how she was raised, that this was all they ever knew and didn't know any other way. There's a vicious cycle through generations of mothers and daughters in my family having the exact same relationship, and that it needed to stop with me. In order to do this, I needed to break the cycle of generational trauma. My mom's wish came true that I ended up having a kiddo that was similar to me. She is fearless, innovative, creative, funny, and has the biggest imagination. At around 3 years old, I began to notice that Lucy had challenges with aspects of her life that other kiddos her age did not. Some are that she doesn't like loud noises or specific tones. She will tell someone who is singing out of tune to stop singing and shush them. She has an extremely hard time going from one activity to the next and has no concept of safety. She climbs everything. This kid scales the walls and is so strong. After evaluations, it was discovered that she has sensory processing disorder. I again found myself diving into books about this so that I could learn as much as I could to be the best parent for her. I even wrote a resource guide for her before the official IEP was compiled. I will always remember the day that I told my mom about what was going on with Lucy, that she was running away during transitions and when overstimulated, that she was climbing everything and didn't like certain sounds. She looked at me and said, "Oh, that's what you used to do." And it dawned on me that I too have similar challenges as Lucy, that I grew up without support and figured out a way to live. I was labeled as bad, difficult, and challenging by my mother and others, when really, I just needed resources to help me instead of punishments. I have now made it my motherhood mission to provide support, love, and guidance for Lucy to have a different life experience than I did. With raising Lucy, I've been able to do a lot of healing from the pain that I have experienced. Over time, I have stopped listening to my mother's voice in my head about what type of person I am, and I started to listen to myself. I have changed the narrative that I was given when growing up, and my life is forever better for it.
Yes, you're a good mom, girl. Yes, indeed. Woo!
Woo!
Thank you for that very powerful reminder, Allison, that sometimes you need to shut out all the noise and really trust your own instincts, right? And now, let's hear from someone who relies on the sweetest memories of his mother. With his story, Memories of Mom, please welcome Richard Hewson.
I'm a big, tough guy, except when I'm reading this. My parents divorced when I was 5. My stepfather was a good man, but severely hampered by his alcoholism. So Mom, being a mother, and with everything it means to be a mother, and being one tough mother, raised her 6 surviving children essentially alone. We lived on a 150-acre farm in the hills of Pennsylvania. If you attended one of our family reunions, the first thing you'd notice was the circus tent in the front yard under which tables were set and food was served. Around that would be scads of kids and dogs running in and out of tent pegs, people's legs, and relatives chatting. The other side of the driveway held the constantly attended basketball half court and adjacent volleyball area. Further off yet, you'd hear the endlessly raspy clamor of a motocross track. We had a large family. And sitting dead center of it all, laughing, you would find my mother, the matriarch of the clan, to whom everyone deferred. I'll get through this. For most of my life, my mother ran a restaurant in Elmira, New York, and a truck stop diner out on Route 17. Both were open 24 hours a day. Whenever one of her elderly regulars didn't show up, she'd call them to see if they were okay. If they were ill, she'd call a cab and have the food delivered to them, free of charge. When asked why coffee was always free to the local cops, she'd reply, if I ever need them, they'll be there. And they were. She never had a problem which wasn't handled quickly. Additionally, with her continual driving back and forth between the restaurants and the farm, she never got a speeding ticket. I myself have heard the words as a cop looked at my license. Oh, you're Ann's son? Be more careful. Get out of here. With 6 kids to raise and 2 24-hour restaurants to run, Mom worked hard. She'd come home, crash for a few hours, be unable to give a coherent answer to anything, and then go back to work. She often said you could fire a gun off while she was sleeping and it wouldn't wake her. We had to try. Now understand, if you moved around the house quietly, trying not to wake her up, she'd yell out, "Who is that? Quit sneaking around and mind your damn business." So we learned to just act natural. Given that, we naturally walked into her room one day, opened the window, and kept our eyes on her while I fired a 20-gauge shotgun out. She never flinched. At some point, we got an above-ground pool in the upper dooryard. Us 2 older boys could run up, leap over the edge, and dive into the water, but the 2 younger boys weren't quite tall enough, so we had a grand time lifting them up above our heads, running toward the pool, and torpedoing them into it. It was great fun. During picnics or reunions, we also grabbed anyone else within reach, yelling "torpedo" every time. And yes, after soaking all our aunts, uncles, cousins, and friends, we finally focused our unbridled attention on our mother. She was still a force. She was still a force of nature back then, so it took a while. But we finally got her up above our heads, running toward the pool, while she yelled, "No torpedo, no torpedo!" We didn't know she was scared of water. She had nearly drowned as a youngster, had been scared of water ever since, and never told us about it. The pool was only waist deep, so she survived just fine. In fact, she came up laughing, partly at herself, partly at us, partly at herself for her own unneeded fear, and that's when she told us about nearly drowning. When forced into it, she would be honest. In 1972, Hurricane Agnes came through Elmira, New York. Late at night, as water spilled over the break wall, cops came into the restaurant and said, "Get out, now." Mom and her waitstaff put a few things up on the counter and strolled out, chatting easily. Within a few hours, the water was 10 feet deep. The ceiling was 11 and was the only thing that didn't need thorough cleaning or replacing. When the water went down and Mom got a chance to see it, she turned and walked down the street crying for one of the few times in her life. By the time she got to the corner, she looked up to see that other people had lost their homes, not just their business. She turned right back around. Set up a borrowed camping trailer on the street out front and sold hot dogs and hamburgers to bring in some money while the restaurant was being refurbished. Make no mistake, Hurricane Agnes was hell, but she wasn't tougher than my mother. The only other time I ever heard my mother cry was when our youngest sister, Kathy Lee, was born 3 months early. In 1960, they simply couldn't keep her alive with her undeveloped lungs. She passed in a few hours. No matter how tough, my mother was a mother above all else, devastated by the loss of her child. I like to think they are now reunited.
It's that mascara moment it's here. Thank you, Richard. Your mother, what a powerhouse. Sounds like she mothered an entire community, not just you kids. And those are the women, we need those women in this world. We really do. Instinct and memories, though they're very different things, are both important resources when it comes to mothering. Knowing what to do next, how to do it. In our next story, we hear our storyteller strike a much different tone about memories, how compelling they can be. Here with her story, 4 Fowls. Please welcome Kristen French.
How do I start? I asked a friend. They said, tell a story that is hard to tell. As I allow my inner voice to travel through my head and into my heart, I ask the question, are you, Kristen, a mother? The exercise starts off as a gentle ponder, then involves into intense interrogation. The inquiry has a lightness to it with sudden jolts like a pinball machine. Am I a mother? It wasn't until I sat down to write this story that it occurred to me why I decided not to be a conventional mother. My past 20 years, I have been spent being a dedicated, hopeful educator, full of boldness and eagerness, as well as episodes of loneliness and rage. Besides being a pet parent, this has been my ultimate motherhood. Tending to children, intently observing their words, actions, moods, tone, and all the spaces in between. Creating room for kids to play, create, wonder, evaluate, grow, communicate, and resist. As over the decades, I simultaneously do the same for myself. Is this what mothers do? There are the silver glitter scattered all over the table moments in my school work days when the situations are messy and overwhelming, yet they're equally beautiful and fun. And it is then when I know what I am doing is exactly right for me. It's those moments that make entering my childless home somewhat freeing, because I know I will have more to give of myself the next time. Kids are an essential part of my existence. There is an exact thread of my being that I feel radiate when I think about the children's lives I have been and I am a part of, and the ones I have yet to meet. Was I set up to avoid traditional motherhood? This is the first time I'm consciously and purposely asking myself this question. Why would I want to be one after seeing the excruciating pain on my mother's face when we locked eyes from across the gymnasium, knowing my father was in need of emergency care? It was December 1997 of my senior third period away basketball game, and I was on the bench with my fourth foul, engaging in spurs of negative self-talk for making a mistake and possibly letting my team and parents down. Startled by the sudden commotion going on in the stands across the way, I looked up and I immediately locked eyes with my mom's horrified expression. My dad had fallen and was shaking. I immediately had to escape the unbearable chaos, so I sprinted out of the gym and collapsed to the school hallway floor. I could not witness the pain on my mother's face any longer, nor did I want her to witness my helpless heartache. Hours after driving on the country back roads in a winter blizzard in the northern part of New York to an unfamiliar hospital, I was told my dad had a heart attack and died. My thoughts as I was writing this story led me back to the words of my 18-year-old self that I had written in a journal titled, "Fire in my heart, ice in my veins." One early entry says, "After 6.5 months after your death, Dad, I still do not believe you are no longer with us. After your death, I'm very afraid of losing things that are important and close to me." Another journal entry asks, "How do you make sense of his death?" And I respond, "I can't. I don't understand why good people have to die." One of the last things I wrote in that journal 24 years ago was, what did my dad teach me? That age is just a number and can't be measured by an exact number. What is important is how you live that number. The dash between the day you were born and the day you die is what's important. Well, this sure is a lot of dad talk in a story that's supposed to be about motherhood. But I think my dad is the reason I am not a mother. I decided to reserve the spaces in my heart and soul to love other people's children. That love seems more manageable to me. Maybe I will regret this decision to not give birth and raise a child of my own. And if that day comes, I imagine that will be a regret I can tolerate. For now, there are no regrets because my life is filled with extraordinary people and moments that I believe have been possible because of my dad dying. This story would not be complete without highlighting another entry I found in my 1998 journal. It contained words my track coach whispered to me the night my dad died. Be strong for your mother. And since those words left his lips, I flexed my heart muscle and I decided that is how I would lead my life. I would show my strength by creating so much pride in my mom's idea of motherhood that the pain of my dad's death would dissipate. This quest has been a perfect distraction. I can now answer the question, are you, Kristen, a mother? And my answer, yes, I am.
Oh, man. Amazing, amazing story. Thank you, Kristen, for your bravery in sharing that and reminding us that we can lead our own path. So from this sobering moment on the basketball court, we now move to a very, very sweet and powerful glimpse of a mother and child team and the pride that's inherent in that pairing. So now with her story, Mama, please welcome Sharita Trawick.
Mama, thank you for the sacrifices you've made for me. Thank you for all your love and your care. I remember our Sunday routine. Wash my hair, oil my scalp, cornrows for the week. Mama, did you know that our ancestors during slavery used braids to relay messages? What was your coded message? What did you want the world to know about me and you? That we were both bigger than the teenage pregnancies which conceived us? That in spite of your mom not being able to raise you, that the Lord did not forget you and sent you an angel that I would call Grandma and you would call Mama, who would teach us both to love the Lord and to remind us that no matter what the world would throw at us, all things were possible through Christ Jesus. Ooh, those cornrows, Mama. As I look back now, each one in pattern, I realize they were a love letter from you to me and a warning to the outside world. The strength of your hands, Mama. Braids so tight, they dared any hair to come undone. They carried a message to the outside world. They better be careful with me because I was loved. I belonged to someone. I was unique, different. I was kept. So you better not mess with me. These little masterpieces that you would create with my hair were our own little private piece de resistance against the narratives that the world would try to throw at us. Mama, I thought I would reach a point in my life where I could take care of you. Buy you fancy things, take you to fancy places and on fancy trips, But the truth is, sadly, you're still taking care of me. And some days, I feel like I'm failing at taking care of you. Mama, you never told me that you were gonna need me so much, and that balance would be my biggest enemy. I try. I promise I do. I call every day. Most importantly, I pray for you every day. I really try to remember to come and pull those trash cans around every Thursday. To call the insurance company about those overpayments they owe you and order those boxes so you can start to downsize that big old house. I know they probably appear like simple tasks to you, but every time I reach for them, I am bombarded by soccer practice, band lessons. Mom, can you take me to work? Mom, what's for dinner? Mom, I have a concert in 2 days and I need, insert text. Or honey, have you seen my, insert text again. Baby cries, teething, diapers, this meeting, this Zoom. Miss Trawick, we need you to get blood work done. And of course, hello, this is CVS Pharmacy. Your prescriptions are ready. It's midnight, and Mama, I'm exhausted again. I'm sorry I'm failing you. I wish I could walk in your strength. Oh, to wake up in the morning again to the smell of black-eyed peas and smoked turkey cooking in the crock pot overnight, preparing for dinner before we even had breakfast. The children like clockwork, washing up for school, sharing one bathroom happily, whose clothes were ready because they had been trained to iron and hang them by the door for inspection when you returned from your 3 to 11 shift. You laugh when I tell you my children are often caught wearing the same clothes to school in a week. That they do laundry almost every day before school and never eat in the morning, and how fast food has become a dinner staple. Again, I feel like I'm failing your peaches and cream hot oatmeal legacy. Already prepared in a bowl on the counter, only needing a quick zap from the microwave to warm my body and fill my little soul with warmth and goodness, needed to withstand the cold bus stop and long ride to that school. Snacks in my pre-packed backpack, and 25 cents for ice cream in the lower pocket of my backpack. You took care of me. It still makes me smile the way you took care of me. Thank you, Mama.
Could you guys smell the cooking? Sharita, I'm telling you, because and my sister will attest to this, waking up on a weekend morning in our house with the smell of pancakes and pine sol, right, Norma? That meant Mom was home. Mom didn't work an extra shift. No, we were getting some good pancakes, followed by cleaning that we had to do for hours. That was a whole other story, though, right? Thank you, Sharita, for sharing such a rich, beautiful, detailed story about caregiving, taking care of another person. And from the many stories that we've heard so far, we've learned that motherhood is, it is not a simple endeavor. As my dad likes to always say, it takes a village. Every situation is complex in its own way, and we are here to honor the very complex work of the SPCC as well. So please don't forget, when you have the opportunity, to visit their website, spcc-roch.org, to make a donation. It makes an incredible difference. The path to motherhood is never the same for anyone. It can be certainly unconventional, and our next storyteller shares her story of that unconventional path, of the unique and powerful bonds that are often forged on the journey through motherhood. With her story, My Daughter's Mother, please welcome Holly Garitano.
When I first met my daughter's mother, I had been caring for her daughter for 6 months. I thought of her every day. How could I not? Being a mother myself, the thought of physically being separated from your child for reasons you might not completely understand would be a hard thing to grasp. Our story begins when I learned through a mutual acquaintance that there was a teenage girl who had just had a baby. Being a foster parent, these stories are often heard, but this one seemed different. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. But somehow I felt as if I knew her, even loved her. I could not stop thinking of this young mother and her baby. I only knew them by name and would often ask the caseworkers if they were okay. I prayed for them regularly, not knowing what they were facing. After months of having this mother and daughter on my mind, I found myself calling the home finding unit one morning. I let them know that if this baby I had heard of happened to come into foster care, to call us and we would take her. To my surprise, 5 hours later, the same woman called to say that some paperwork had landed on her desk. The baby that I had called about earlier that day was most likely coming into foster care that afternoon. She said, "Would you take her?" I couldn't speak. She asked again, still speechless. Finally, I found the words, and I said, "I think I should call my husband." My daughter's mother was resistant to having a relationship with me at first. Who could blame her? Who was I? I persisted. I wanted to know her so badly. Her baby girl was growing and changing. And I wanted to tell her the things that she was doing every day. I wanted to confirm to her what she most likely already knew. Her daughter was amazing. I was excited the first time we met. I had made my way back into the room at the visit center. She was sitting on a couch in the small room. I was finally getting to meet this person that I had felt I already somehow knew. I am not a hugger, but I hugged her tight. To my disappointment, she did not hug me back. Again, who could blame her? Who was I? She didn't know me. I made small talk and we said goodbye. I felt elated. I wanted to see her again, but what I did was frowned upon, and I was later reprimanded for entering their visit. At every court date, I'd sit and watch my daughter's mother, hoping that she would talk to me. I'd be sure to sit where she could easily see me. With each passing court date, she became more and more open to me. I started reaching out through social media, sending pictures and funny stories. I was so very happy to have this newfound way to share with her. After 2 years, we had a really hard court date. My husband and I watched our daughter's mother give up her daughter. It was awful and painful to witness. I cannot imagine a more selfless act. She surrendered her daughter, knowing in detail what that meant. She would be permanently separated by law from her daughter and gave up all legal rights to her. We agreed to 4 visits a year. I told our lawyer that seemed like not enough, but she assured us this was appropriate. She told us if we wanted to do more, that there was nothing that said that we couldn't. 4 was thrown out the window. To me, there was no appropriate number to place on our daughter's mother seeing her daughter. And while I cannot speak to all situations of this kind, I can assure you that in this one, it is in the absolute best interest of this mother and this daughter to know each other. How can a relationship thrive when a number limits it. My daughter's mother is the bravest mother that I know. This has been far from an easy journey for her. What she has emotionally endured since the birth of her daughter is incomprehensible. I pray that somehow, even though this was Plan B, they can both find peace in this life that neither of them chose. Adopted kids are often told how lucky they are. I see nothing lucky about a mother and child being separated. As mothers go, I know that she's number one. I'm number two. There's no competition. No one makes our daughter light up the way her mother does. No one. Happy Mother's Day to the mother who doesn't think she's worthy, but she's wrong, dead wrong. She is the most worthy in the eyes of our daughter.
Told you guys. Fake lashes. Got to get on that train, Holly. Thank you. There really is no one right way to do life. No matter what you're doing in life, there's no one right way to learn how life comes to be even those stories. How do we learn how life comes to be? Well, there's many different ways. Our next storyteller is going to liven up this room a little bit with a very fun tale of his tale of learning about the origins of life, how he might have been led astray in the process. With his story, The Birds, the Bees, and Charlie Brown, please welcome Scott Seifritz.
I was home alone with my mother, and I was throwing a fit. I may be misremembering slightly, but I'm almost certain it was the only time in my entire childhood that I ever misbehaved. I had a good reason, though. My mother was being a barrier to my path to happiness, and I was beyond frustrated with the injustice of it all. I no longer recall what it was that I wanted so badly to do, but she was generally a reasonable woman, so preventing me from doing this forgotten thing was most likely in my best interest. Still, I persisted in being combative without making any headway. I was like a 4-year-old Clarence Darrow, impassionately arguing my case, and she the weary judge who'd heard it all before. My airtight arguments were quickly deflating before me because, to misquote Abraham Lincoln, a child who is his own lawyer has an idiot for a client. Since I was unable to produce an expert witness to boost my case, I did the next best thing. What is known in legal circles as stomping out of the kitchen. Pouting in my room, angry at my mother and my perceived unfairness of the situation, I came up with a perfect retort. Perfect because it would either be the catalyst to get my way or would at least deliver a crushing blow to my mother's authority. I smugly marched back into the kitchen and before resting my case, announced with the originality of a cliche, I didn't ask to be born. At that moment, she was probably thinking the same thing. Had this been a jury trial, I may have scored some sympathy points. Ultimately, though, my mother was having none of it. And I ended up spending the rest of my day confined to my room on some trumped-up contempt charge. In hindsight, I suppose her judgment had been just. I was being a pain in the ass, and frankly, I couldn't even be sure that I hadn't asked to be born, because like most kids at that age, I didn't have a good grasp of how babies came to be. I was fairly certain there was no big white bird involved. That just seemed ridiculous. However, had anyone told me Santa was responsible for newborn deliveries, oh, I would have totally accepted that. After all, he had the logistics down pat and knew where everyone lived. But a stork? Come on. One summer day at the beach, my sister Sharon told me our parents had planted Scotch seeds in the backyard, and I was a product of them. She went on to say our sister Sue had picked me before my feet were fully developed, and they had to replant me. Her story seemed dubious at best, yet I couldn't fully dismiss it. I did, in fact, have bad feet. As a good little Catholic boy, I simply assumed God doled out babies as he saw fit. That just made the most sense. Obviously, he had willy-nilly sent my parents 4 children spread out over 9 years. Then one day, 5 years later, when my mother was going on 37, he realized they were living an unfulfilled life. And they sent them me. Who could blame them? It was my friend Morris, however, who finally set me straight in the ways of baby production when I was 8. He explained the mechanics of it all, and frankly, I was appalled. There was no way my parents were involved in any of that nonsense. Yet Morris was adamant. He was 12, so obviously quite worldly. I pondered this for a moment. Well, maybe that's one way, I finally said, attempting to shake the offending image from my brain and the stomach acid from my throat. But sometimes God just gives you a baby. He shrugged, and we moved on to more important things like melting army men and pelting each other with tree fruit. As close as my family was, there were certain topics we just didn't broach, and sex was definitely one of them. I'll give my mother credit for using the proper terms for body parts, however. There were no willies or hoo-haws in our house. In fact, the first time my mother correctly identified my little buddy to me, my naive kid ears heard the word peanuts, like Charlie Brown. Needless to say, I was very confused as there was only a mild resemblance. Yet, as was my way, I was far too embarrassed to ask for clarification, so I kept my confusion to myself, or rather used it to misinform a generation of other little boys on the playground. Ultimately, the playground was where I learned about sex, in theory anyway, and where I came to terms with the fact that God normally isn't involved in making babies, despite the fact his name is often invoked repeatedly and increasingly louder during the act. Bless her soul, though, my mother wasn't going to let the playground be my only source for sex ed. One day, when I was around 13, she came to my bedroom where I was hanging out. "Here, I got this for you," she said, handing me a manila envelope. As it was neither Christmas nor my birthday, I was puzzled. I accepted the gift, and she left, closing the door behind her. I tentatively opened the envelope and removed the small booklet inside. It had a title along the lines of Sex Ed for Teens. I was mortified, and then disappointed that all the pictures it contained were drawings and not actual photos. I was so embarrassed by the whole thing that I never wanted to leave my room. Yet, there was a part of me that thought I probably shouldn't stay in there too long either. Ultimately, the book ended up being useful in filling in some knowledge gaps, and as awkward as it was to receive it, I appreciated that my mother was there for me. In fact, she'd always been there for me. She was one of the few people who attended my birth. And before her death in 2020, she was the person I'd known longest by nearly 9 months. She was the one who encouraged me to write and taught me that when drawing flowers, odd numbers are more visually appealing than even ones. She fostered my love of theater and let me stay up to watch West Side Story on TV when I was 6, and then consoled me when I felt inconsolable over Tony's death, which I'm still scarred by to this day. Once, dressed in one of her signature pantsuits, she even carried a bucket of toads 3 blocks to my elementary school classroom so I could display them for show and tell. But it wasn't just me. My mother was there for everyone. Even with limited resources, she never hesitated to help those in need. One time when I was 7, our front doorbell rang. Mom opened the door to find 2 young women standing on our porch, decked out in the beads and bell-bottoms of stereotypical hippies. They said they'd crossed paths with my brother out west while hitchhiking, and he told them if they were ever in the area and needed a place to stay, they should come to our house. My mother invited them in, no questions asked, and put them up for the week. Looking back, it may have been in our family's best interest if she'd at least asked what their take on Charles Manson was, but live and learn, hopefully. While my father was the primary wage earner, my mother kept at the house and made sure things ran smoothly, which they typically did. This, in and of itself, is amazing considering the house 7 of us and a dog lived in relatively harmoniously was only 800 square feet in size and had a single bathroom. Luckily, though, the dog rarely used the bathroom. So why did my parents have so many kids when they really didn't have the room nor the means to upgrade? For a long time, I chalked it up to bad contraceptive advice from the Catholic Church. It turns out there was more to it, according to my mother, who shared a little secret with my sister, Sue. In what can only be described as an awkward bonding moment. One time, years ago, my mother began, we were having a dinner party here at the house. After we ate, the women were all in the kitchen cleaning up, while the men were out in the living room. Your Aunt Peggy announced that she was pregnant. It should be noted here that our parents had had sex exactly 3 times prior to this dinner party, so at the time they already had 3 children. She continued, I always loved babies, and I just kept thinking about how I'd like another baby, but I wasn't sure if your father would want any more. At this point, she turned to my 58-year-old sister. Have you heard of the rhythm method? I like to imagine Sue freezing for a moment and then being disappointed in her inability to dematerialize. Yes, Mom, I'm familiar with the rhythm method. Well, my mother continued, I decided to adjust my calendar a little bit and see what would happen. And that's how child number 4 came to be. When my sister asked, what about Scott? My mother's reply was more matter of fact. Oh, that just happened. Apparently, my mother also subscribed to the sometimes God just gives you a baby theory. My mother may not have passed the baby wanting gene down to me, or the gene that says vegetables must be boiled until you can suck them through a straw. But that's okay, because I got so many of the other great parts of her. Empathy, honesty, art appreciation, and the desire to help others. I wouldn't have it any other way. Looking back, I realized that day long ago when I was being insufferable, when I righteously announced I didn't ask to be born, I unwittingly gave my mother the perfect opening to shut me up. But she didn't, because she loved me. And even though I was pushing her to her limits, she took the high road like she always did. I can't say I would have reacted as well. It's true, I never asked to be born, and apparently my mother never asked it either. If I had asked, however, I would have picked her to be my mom, and not once in the 54 years, 9-ish months, that I knew her, did I ever feel she wouldn't have picked me too, with the exception of that one time in high school, and maybe 1 or 2 times after that.
Oh, thank you, Scott. I think now we're all replaying conversations with our parents, wondering what really was the truth behind that story. Maybe we're all questioning a little bit of what we've learned. Whether it's about the beginning of life or the end, every experience is vastly different. Here, our next speaker illuminates how she learned to let her grandma go and keep her near, which is a balancing act I think we all need to figure out. With her story, Oceans Apart, please welcome Melissa Federson.
Glacier Bay might have felt majestic to the other cruisers on the observation deck. But its desolate chill broke my heart. Why had I sacrificed a week of summer to drift toward the Arctic Circle? And why didn't I have cell reception? My grandma Sarah was dying back in the Bronx. My parents were at her side, holding her hands and reciting prayers to comfort her. I could only scowl at the hulking ice caps, pace the walking track, and wait for my phone to ping. Having sprinted to the deck whenever the satellite map in my cabin showed a cell tower, I tipped over the railing with my arm extended, waving my phone into the edge of the world. I nearly fell into the Gulf of Alaska before accepting that we'd lose cell service for a while. When Canada emerged on port side, I braced myself for a text bearing bad news. Instead, my mom had written that Grandma Sarah had rallied and was asking for chocolate pudding. She held on for 2 more weeks. So I vowed that when Grandma Phyllis showed signs of decline, I would not be distant in any sense. I was so attached to her as a child that I called her Grandma Mommy and Nanny Bird, after Big Bird's grandma on Sesame Street. She and I resemble each other exactly. Nothing could stop my trips to visit her. Nothing short of a pandemic. Grandma had practiced for decades what the CDC has only lately advised. She never touched a public bathroom doorknob without a paper towel. She let library books and anything borrowed sit for a while before she used them. If she were under the weather, she'd stay home for 10 days. She scolded me for going out with wet hair, fearing I'd catch chill, even in Florida. My grandpa called her Nurse Nancy, though I now consider her an infectious disease specialist. And because she lived this way for decades, she wasn't concerned about COVID nor anxious to be vaccinated. I don't go anywhere, she said. That meant instead of visiting, I had to settle for phone calls. In her last few days, she was too weak to speak, but I know she heard me. This past January, it was heartbreaking to lay eyes on her after 3 years at the entrance to a funeral chapel as traffic honked impatiently and the attendant sprayed us with Lysol. Weeks later, our family arrived in Florida to stay with my parents at their condo. My mom asked if we'd like to join her at my grandma's apartment, where she spent most afternoons, to help clean out and see what we might want. Yes, I said, even as my daughter's eyes teared up. I knew what she was thinking. It would hurt our hearts to walk in without seeing her, on her feet, with her walker, and then in a wheelchair, saying, "Hello, dear girls." I knew it would be the most painful moment of the trip. I was mistaken. The worst pain occurred 90 minutes earlier when I jumped into the ocean for a hot second and got stung in the thigh by a Portuguese man-o-war. The venom had festered down the leg. Red dots marched toward a spreading patch of inflamed skin, like a thought bubble bloated with my dread. "Oh gosh," was all my mother could say. "Look at that." We didn't have Grandma there to say, "Oh, that's nothing, that'll heal, worry not." As Mom handed me a pile of silk scarves and cashmere sweaters, I burrowed my face inside and caught, to my surprise and delight, the unmistakable whiff of Grandma's embrace. That bouquet of nicotine, spearmint, and cedar wove right into my nostrils to dispel the anxiety clouding my brain. "Hi, Nanny Bird," I said. I wore the scarf to urgent care the next day, gripping her leather wallet. Bacteria had entered the puncture, and I had developed cellulitis. The doctor ordered a shot of Rocephin immediately, which the nurse gave me after wrapping up a heated 10-minute call with her mother. This would have caught my grandmother's attention, creating the diversion she needed. She refused to let medical angst get the best of her. Last year, when her doctor told her she had to either amputate her leg or go into hospice, my 95-year-old, 80-pound grandmother said, "I can't decide. Let me think." Dr. Schuster made the decision easy when he told her that in hospice, she could smoke as much as she wanted. At urgent care, I tried to breathe the scarf through my mask to keep her close. The doctor traced the infection with a surgical marker and told me that if it crept beyond the lines, I should go to the emergency room. I watched those markings obsessively when I wasn't watching my mother's face. This time, she said what I needed to hear. "Don't worry, it'll heal." As the infection seeped into the line that was blurred with my nervous sweat, I wound the scarf around my fingers. Eventually, the patch retreated and faded. I kissed the gauze in gratitude. Back home, I opened the wallet. I took out my insurance card and then nudged free each of my grandma's cards just to receive another jolt of her presence. Her Florida non-driver's ID. Her Palm Beach County library card, and in between, her vaccination card, 2 doses of Moderna from December 2021. We were so close to seeing you, Grandma, but as always, you were there when I needed you.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Those memories are so powerful when we think of the different folks that maybe we've lost over the last few years. From trying to find cell reception in the middle of the ocean to a poignant tale about how it's never too late to learn a new dance. Our next speaker shares her story with us called Learning to Dance. Please welcome April Holmes.
When I think about trying to describe the relationship with my mother, I always come to think of a dance. When I say that, you may be thinking of a graceful ballet or an elegant waltz. But when I use that analogy, I'm thinking more of the kind of dance that happens in a junior high gymnasium, the kind with averted eyes and sweaty palms and unsure hands. You see, my mother didn't raise me, so our relationship lacks the rapport that develops from years of love, conflict, and reconciliation. When I was a baby, my parents divorced, and because of many factors known and unknown, my dad was granted full custody of my older brother and me, and my mother had visitation on weekends and holidays. To say that my parents' divorce was acrimonious would be an understatement. To add to that contention, my dad, in short order, remarried a woman with 9 children of her own. She also had undiagnosed mental illnesses and would, for the next 16 years, find a strange satisfaction in humiliating and belittling my brother and me. My dad and his wife added 3 children to the family in quick succession. And for those of you that are having trouble with the math, we were now a family of 16. Around the time I turned 4, my dad and his wife decided to move their whole brood from northern Michigan, where my mother lived, to the hills of West Virginia. This, of course, placed some significant financial and geographic obstacles in the path of my mother when it came to visitation. Nevertheless, that first Christmas after the move, she made the drive to pick up my brother and me for the holidays. What she saw when she arrived shocked and infuriated her. 16 people living on the salary of an auto mechanic meant that we lived in overt poverty. According to my mother, we were filthy with black rings around our mouths and noses from the coal used to heat the dilapidated hotel we were calling a house. Additionally, my brother and I both had lice, and I had open sores on my head from scratching. My mother made a decision in that moment that would forever change all of our lives. She decided she would take us for Christmas and would not be bringing us back. In other words, she began committing a crime known as non-custodial parental abduction. I have small swatches in my memory of that time with my mom. We were on the run, so we lived in different places, from Destin, Florida to Denver, Colorado. I remember the beach and the balcony of our Florida apartment. I remember walking to the 7-Eleven near our home in Colorado to buy candy bars, a Baby Ruth for me and a Butterfinger for my brother. I remember running to my mother's bed when I was scared and immediately feeling soothed by her warmth and scent as I climbed in with her. At this point, I was almost 5, and my mother had enrolled my brother and me in school. So I also remember being called down to the principal's office, where we were picked up by 2 police officers and transported to a temporary foster home. This was 1984, the height of the abduction scare frenzy, and our pictures had been published on missing children posters that were distributed weekly to schools all over the nation. My brother and I had been recognized by my kindergarten teacher. We didn't get to see my mother, and we didn't get to say goodbye. I didn't see my mother again outside of a courtroom until I was 21. In the intervening years, I suffered emotional and occasional physical abuse at the hands of my stepmother. She took great pleasure in her triumph over my mother and having rescued us from her, but she had no desire to be our mother. My brother and I were often the target of her ridicule and the butt of her jokes, and we sought refuge in each other and occasionally in my dad, who periodically acknowledged his part in the situation in which we found ourselves, but felt powerless to change our circumstances. At the age of 17, I graduated from high school and loaded up my Honda hatchback with all of my earthly belongings and traveled across the country to attend college. Only 2 of my 13 siblings had successfully navigated the process of applying to and attending college, and they mentored me as best they could. While attending college, I met a man named Scott, who made me laugh and also feel safer than I ever had before, and he wasn't scared away by all of my family trauma and drama. We fell in love and drove to Las Vegas and eloped. That was 24 years ago. In the intervening years, Scott and I both finished college, started careers, and made ourselves into a family with 3 amazing kids, a son and 2 daughters. In those 24 years, my mother has slowly come back into my life, tentative and unsure steps between intimate strangers. She attended my college graduation and the birth of my 3rd child. But these events, while happy, always find us in our awkward dance. Me afraid of asking too much of her, and her afraid of invading my life too much. Our relationship lacks the natural give and take of mothers who've had their whole lives to choreograph their own unique steps. This part of a lack of a mother that I didn't anticipate is the lack of knowledge I have about how to be a mother. What does healthy motherhood look like and feel like? My only maternal examples were absent or dysfunctional. So as I raise my own 2 daughters, I have to make up the steps of our dance as I go along, always afraid of stepping on toes or tripping and falling. But when my Jax curls herself into my lap to describe in exact detail what she needs to create the perfect Halloween costume, or my Paige scampers in the night to climb in my bed and bury her face in my neck, my heart leaps with joy. Because even though I'm making it up as I go along, our steps flow in a way that is once new and familiar. I know when they're going to pirouette or when to stand aside for their solo, because I know them. And with every argument and tearful resolution, every triumph and disappointment, we're choreographing our own unique dance, one that they will someday teach their own daughters, because they will know the steps by heart.
Thank you so much, April, for reminding us that we can do difficult things. The dances, yeah. Whether we're taking those steps on our own to learn or we're doing it in a group, we can learn new dances. And our next speaker celebrates the idea of coming together as a group to learn new things, teaches us about gratitude along the way, how important that is in the process, with her talk, Nature versus Nurture. Please welcome Amy Boyle Johnston.
I turned 50 this year. In my entire childhood, I was told 2 things about this landmark. 1, I believe the world is more screwed up now than it was when I was younger. That I would be convinced that the political division of today was worse than it was in my youth, and that I would be delusional because society has always been this way. And 2, I would appreciate my parents more, and the implication was by then I would miss them. My parents were alive and well, and it's interesting. None of my parents had any of their parents alive at this age. I have lived long enough to go through the stages of 1, admiring them as superheroes, 2, realizing and resenting them because they're just human, 3, finding our differences, 4, realizing that they did try and that they really were just human, and 5, being grateful. 5 is not always easy because, as I said, my parents are still alive and still freely tell me when I'm wrong. To this day, if we are leaving as a family to do something, and if my shirt is untucked, my stepmother will say, "That was an interesting choice." But the funny thing about turning 50 is that I can see more where clearly I was wrong, and it hurts more, and it hurts in a quiet way. But there's one mistake I've been making in this town for the past 25 years or so, and tonight, and for the rest of my life, I get to correct this. You see, I have 3 parents. I have my father, my mother, and my stepmother since age 9. I spent my teenage years between the 2 homes, and for shorthand, I would say my mother's house or my parents. It was and is not an insult to my mother. It was laziness, and I was a teenager. But today I say I have 3 parents, and I do. And the mistake I've made is that whenever people would meet me with my stepmother and she would introduce me as her daughter, people would give that funny look like, "Are you sure?" And I would joke, "Well, she raised me as a teenager, and I wasn't an easy teenager." And the other person would laugh, and we'd all continue to the next formality in the conversation, and that was wrong. 1, most of us were not easy teenagers, especially those of us with stepmothers. But that is not why I am her daughter. She's my parent because she loves me. She cares for me, she helps guide me, and she became my parent, and I was not an easy teenager. And I think in a way our parents, all of our parents, become our parents. In psychology, not to put anyone in a box, there's a phrase, nature versus nurture, and I've never liked that phrase when it comes to ability or talents or kindness, and especially raising children. It is nurture, always. There are people here who will tell you why someone is not their parent because of lack of nurture, a lack of support, a lack of caring, or what have you. In my entire life, when anyone has ever said to a mother, "You make XYZ look so easy," not one mother has ever said, "Oh, this comes naturally." I'm not a mother, but I gotta tell you, it doesn't look easy. And if being a mother came naturally, would anyone be here tonight? Listening? We're all just here trying to figure out what you did, how you survived, how some of us learned to laugh, others to forgive, because we understand that love can be a struggle. I also recognize that my 3rd parent is my parent by choice. She chose to become my parent. She chose to love me, and I recognize that. Years ago, in my 20s, we as a family had been living in Rochester maybe 5 years, and my stepmother is up for a prestigious award, and in her bio, she listed 3 children. Now, the story I'm telling you was told to me. That's part of family too. The stories we are told and the stories we repeat. My stepmother's father was alive then. He had traveled to come up to see his beloved 2 granddaughters, and I believe it was the last time he came up to Rochester before he died. And in a joking way, he said, 3? Is there something you want to tell me? And my stepmother said, Amy. My stepmother did not win that award that year. She lost to Ursula Burns, the first Black woman to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Go Rochester. She did win later. Now, my stepmother's father, he was not, nor is he my grandfather. One of the hardest truths about being human is we don't get to choose who loves us and who loves us in return. And for some of you, that is a sibling or a parent or a child, but he knew that his daughters and granddaughters loved me. But who I am today is partly because of him too. I am an artist and a writer, and by artist I mean photographer, but everyone in this town takes photographs, so I just say artist. But I'm an artist because my stepmother's father enjoyed taking photographs, and throughout his career as a lawyer, in his travels for delight, he took pictures, and we have albums and albums of his photographs. My stepmother also picked up image making, and she carried her camera with her as a young woman, and she took pictures for a college newspaper of protests, her friends, and everyday occurrences she didn't want to forget. And when I was a kid, before I knew my stepmother and her father's interest, I had declared that I wanted to take pictures. And my father and stepmother had not yet had children, so I was under 12, and my stepmother and father gave me erasers shaped like 35mm film rolls, a book published by Kodak about what makes a good picture, and then a 110 camera. By the way, I knew someone with a brand new disc camera, so you can imagine how disappointed I was, but they made up for it. When I was accepted at graduate school for photography 20 years later, both my father and stepmother went out and bought me as a surprise the nicest Nikon and camera lens you could get. When I was in my 20s, on my first international trip, when I was still using my father's Canon F1 from 1972 or 1973 with a broken light meter, my stepmother took out a very nice camera her father had given her and said I could use it, and the unspoken was, "I trust you, but be careful." And I was. And when I shot something later for graduate school, my stepmother took down her Polaroid land camera, one of the coolest cameras ever made, and offered it to me. And my stepmother gave me the best piece of advice ever, which I believe was an observation from her friend Linda that was given to her about taking photographs. Sometimes taking photographs prevents you from participating in what you are trying to capture. Choose wisely. My stepmother has framed photographs, her photographs, in the house I grew up in the house they live in now. And they weren't just family. We had a picture of a windmill she had taken from a moving car. She was my first artist. The passion, joy, expression she was shown by her father was given to me. My undergraduate degree is in history. And I like to joke that New York State has acknowledged this by granting me a BS in history. And I was so good at it, they gave me honors. And the most useful thing I learned from my history degree was how it is defined. The past is fixed with very little remnants, but history is contemporary thinking of the past and can be reinterpreted. And what does this have to do with motherhood, or my stepmother, or you? It has to do with the stories we tell, the stories I tell. Years ago, when I was about 3 or 4 years sober, I did put my parents through the ringer. I heard a man named Steve say that when he got sober, he felt his parents, who were elderly at the time, felt like his alcoholism was their fault. So he would have his parents over for dinner once a week and tell them something they did well. He intentionally told them what they did well. We all know hurts we have caused and hurts that still bleed. We all have things in our past that continue to ache. But what if we told the people the things that they did well? What if we told our parents, our children, our friends what mattered when we felt hurt, seen, loved? And it's not always easy, but I think it's what's needed. And don't say, "Oh, I'll just pay it forward." What if we said thank you? What if we stopped saying all the hurts and said when we felt like we belonged? It will not change your past, but you will have a better and richer history. And there's a catch, especially if it's your mother or stepmother. You have to be honest. You cannot bullshit this. It's your mother. And some of us can't do this, but we can do it for someone who loves us, someone who said you belong, someone who said you matter. This is how we heal. If we only tell our hurt, our failings, we have forgotten the moments that matter to why we are here. But I've learned to live by example, so you can watch me. Jen, you gave me so many things: the gift, the confidence to make art, the ability to pause and listen when receiving criticism, to evaluate myself and my work, to strive to do my best, always. And when I fail or even succeed, to get back up and keep going. Thank you.
I keep saying it. I'm not lying to you when I say the mascara thing. Amy, wow. What if we said when we felt like we belonged? Yeah. Thank you, Amy, for reminding us that giving credit, showing appreciation, it can be so powerful. And from that moment of power, we move to our final story of the night, with a picture-perfect story about coming full circle. Please welcome with her talk, my photo booth mother, Diane Zielinski.
I've always disappointed my mother. My mother wanted a sweet, docile child. She had my life planned. School, live at home until I got married, have a couple of kids, and if I had a job, it would involve a civil service test and typing. Instead, I proceeded to live my rebellious life as a sassy child with attitude. I complained to Santa Claus one Christmas about how he had brought me a bicycle with a flat tire the previous year. She never took me back to Santa's workshop. In those more innocent times, we battled through my teen years over makeup, the length of my skirts, going out at night. There were tearful fights, slammed doors, and quick apologies. We made up with hugs and tears, but we never talked, just Mom and me. Quality time wasn't a phrase in the 1960s. I went away to college, but she kept trying to get me to change my major, journalism, into something more practical, like teaching or nursing. "What is that, Diane?" she said. "Nobody knows what you'll do with that." On the other hand, she found hope that I had a nice boyfriend in college who she thought might be the one to march me down the aisle after graduation. But we broke up, mostly because I was afraid I would end up like her, living a dull life in Batavia, having kids, never exploring new worlds. My mother had the life she wanted, a stable home with a good family. What I saw was drudgery. My father had a stressful factory job and spent evenings fixing watches in his little watch room, a retreat from family life. My mother had a full-time job, 4 children, and an elderly mother who lived with us. After work, she cooked dinner and then ironed the white shirts of our Catholic school uniforms. In my eyes, they had no money and no fun. And she saw my life as the reverse, wasting my life and changing jobs frequently. She despaired that I did not seem to want marriage and kids. I was too independent. I had a house, occasional roommates, but I lived alone. "How can you live like that? I would be so lonely, no one to talk to," she would say. So I have lived my life with the vague cloud of maternal disapproval over me. Rarely, if ever, did my parents ever ask me what I had done, like my latest trip. Not that they didn't care, I just never got the care I hungered for. Now our roles are changing, and I am becoming a parent of my parents. As the only adult child living nearby, I am the one helping to figure out medical bills and driving them to Buffalo for doctor appointments. Now I am the one asking the questions and worrying about whether they are eating well. And occasionally my resentment builds. Why did she not care about my life and what I had done? But sometimes there is a moment of grace and empathy. Many friends have gone through the same situation, and we agree. Our mothers had different standards of what qualified as love back in the day. Maybe with understanding, I can make peace with that. And I have. Redemption has come through, of all things, a stack of 27 photo albums buried in her bedroom closet. Yes, the ones I will inherit. Recently, we started looking at them. As we turned the pages, she opened up for the first time about her family, about her life of insecurity as her father's life as a tenant farmer meant constant moves and unemployment. No wonder she wanted security for me. There was one photo I had never seen before. My parents squeezed into one of those photo booths. It was at Canisius Lake at an amusement park, she thought. A close-up with their smiling faces and their adorable baby. The black and white photo was absolutely beautiful. It could have been a toothpaste ad. My mother looked like a brunette Debbie Reynolds, my father with his slick back black hair like a handsome and grinning Rock Hudson. And there between them as they posed was their beautiful baby girl, me. Perfectly adorable Gerber baby model, a loved baby. This Christmas, I convinced my now 97-year-old father and 93-year-old mother and me, their old baby, to recreate that photo. We were alone that Christmas day, and instead of a photo booth, we had my iPhone, and I took a selfie after much grumbling from my father. Are you out of your mind? A happy threesome, cheek to cheek. So I finally had the courage to ask my mother the question that had been weighing on my mind my entire life. Mom, were you disappointed in how I turned out? I never married, never had kids, never became a secretary, never lived in Batavia. She actually thought about that for a minute, looking off in the distance, glancing at me, and started to laugh nervously. Well, she said, you didn't have to become a secretary. And then we both laughed. I leaned over and gave her a big kiss. She may have been disappointed in my choices, but she was never disappointed in me.
A photo finish for the evening. Yes, thank you, Diane. Thank you, every speaker this evening. Round of applause. And thank you to you for joining us for this very special evening. We hope these stories, the beauty, the bravery that these writers have shared so passionately tonight has moved you in some way. We hope they've inspired you. And here's the thing, as you drive home, as you make your way home tonight, share your experience with whomever you came with, whoever you're calling on the phone. When you get home, share your experience. In the coming weeks, reach out. Yep, I say hug somebody, right? Reach out, call a loved one, share that story. We need to hear these stories. And if you're so moved, write it down. And if and when you're ready to share your story, Listen to Your Mother is always ready to hear them. We also want you to please consider that donation to the Society for the Protection and Care of Children, if you're able. That website, one last time, is spcc-roch.org. They're helping to rewrite the stories for so many families in our community, and that is amazing, important, beautiful work, as we've heard from the stories tonight. To the production team, everyone here, thank you for your amazing work to make tonight a reality. Keep finding these wonderful voices, these hidden gems in your lives, in your family's lives. Reach out and find those stories. We're all the better for knowing them. And now, I will say to you all, enjoy taking the COVID pants off. If you had the stretchy pants, good for you. If you did the fake lashes, I told you, this is a good move. But it is my great pleasure to thank you all and invite the cast to please stand with me. Thank you again for an amazing Listen to Your Mother Rochester.
I was born at St. Mary's, so we were living off of Genesee Street. It was actually 219 Shelter Street, I remember.
One thing that I want to stress about this is that this is a family history, and when those who know the family history are gone, then so is the history, unless you put it down somewhere.
What is your favorite memory of me?
On the changing table. When you were on the changing table, I used to sing to you. We did, I love you, what more can I say? Believe me, there's no other way. I love you.
I went to work in Neisner Brothers when I was 13 years old. But you can only get a work permit when you're 14.
So you lied.
So I changed the 23 to 22, and I worked there after school.
Let's talk about your kids.
Yeah.
So tell me about your kids and what makes them unique and different and special.
Oh boy. You know what's interesting is I said this to you the other day. I really thought my kids would be more like me.
What was that like for you to be with your daughter and have your grandchild born? Like, what was that like?
Totally amazing. Totally amazing. That's not every mother gets to do that.
Well, what it meant to you, it meant to me. Because it was having you there for at least one was amazing. Amazing that you were able to be there.
Today's live stream event was produced at RockVox Recording and Production in Bushnell's Basin, Rochester's first purpose-built podcast and live stream studio featuring 2 podcast studios, a voiceover studio, and full audio and video production services. Mouth off at RockVox, rockvox.com.